All right, everybody, let's make a start. Hello, welcome to this session. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being at Teams Nation. So I'm going to couple of slides and then we're going to jump into demo and talk through all that stuff. And actually this comes at a really good time if you were just in the last session where Nandeep and Smita were talking about Azure OpenAI, because we're going to cover a little bit of that, but I wasn't planning on going into loads and loads of detail about Azure OpenAI and all of the playground and stuff, but that's great because they did. So that's really good. We can jump right into what we need, which is perfect. All right. Okay. A little bit about me. So I've been doing this stuff for a while. Obviously, the stuff we're talking about is all new and exciting because that is AI and that's how AI is at the moment. But I've been doing UC stuff in the Microsoft space for a really long time now. And I've been talking about it, blogging about it, doing videos about it for a while. You can find me online if you want. And yeah, I'm also a Microsoft MVP. Enough about me. Let's get straight into the actual problem that we're trying to solve today, which is pretty obvious from the title, but everybody's making bots and that's great. Everybody wants to use LLMs, but what people really want to do is connect that to their data so that they can get access to their data, and they want to do that. The thing that's really changed, people have always needed to access and interact with their data. That bit hasn't changed, but the way we do it is shifting really quickly. And the reason for that is that the existing ways are just painful for developers, like things like creating user interfaces and websites and internal applications just to allow people to just retrieve some data from a database, because for some reason users don't want to go and learn database languages all by themselves and get to the data themselves. So there's always been this kind of complicated way of like trying to give access to the right amount of data to users so they can get their jobs done. And LLMs really and sort of chatbots, and that's really exploded because suddenly there's this ability for users to talk to bots, in a way that they can be really happy with and doesn't require an awful lot of work because of the LLMs. Their perceived understanding, their perceived reasoning is of a much higher bar that users are much more willing to interact with them. The trouble, of course, is that they have their own data and it's not your data. And so it's no good trying to ask them specific questions about a particular domain because they don't know anything about it. What you really want to do is combine all these things together so you've got an LLM, but it's grounded in your data. And we talked a little bit about that in the last session. But that's really the focus of how, what we're going to do. But we're going to do it with a really practical example. In fact, I'm going to use the Teams Nation session list as my data source, so it's something we're kind of super familiar with and we can play with, and we can see how it works. Okay, so that's kind of our problem, and we're going to solve it in what I hope is the easiest way possible, so that it's something that you can go and take home and do today. There's a million questions that you might be thinking right now, such as, well, can't you just put it all into Microsoft 365 and have Copilot do it? Yeah, you absolutely could do that. You can use connectors. You can take all your data and put it into Microsoft 365, and then you can use the Copilot chat and you can talk to Copilot and interrogate your data that way. The challenge with doing that is that you're not going to get an awful lot of say over when your data gets used or when it doesn't in answering questions. So if you asked a very, very specific question and the answer is in your sort of corpus of data, you might get the right answer. You can't really say just only look at this bit of data or this data set when answering all these questions, because Copilot doesn't really work like that. And if you've got lots of different sources of data all over your tenant, which you will have, you've got the data you just put in via connectors, and then you'll have anything else you've got in SharePoint or Teams or your emails or anything like that. So it's all going to get kind of combined and smushed together into one thing. And it won't give you that single, like, this is the one place that I can send users to if they have questions about a specific thing. Could you use the Teams AI library? Yes, absolutely. We're not going to use the Teams AI library today. The reason for doing that, it's a very nice, very quick and easy way of creating a new bot from scratch that has access to an LLM and is backed with a language model, and that you can provide your own vector data source to if you want to do RAG. So RAG is, we're going to talk about in a minute, retrieval augmented generation. This is you augmenting the LLMs with your own data, which is really what we're doing. So yes, you could do that, but you need to have a vector data source. Now, if you have a vector data source, then you probably are already set. Most people don't have one because for the last 20, 30, 40 years, we haven't been using vector data sources. We've been using relational data sources mostly in things like SQL Server. So that's where all our data is, and that's where we want it to stay. So this is a bit of a challenge, and we're going to look through that in a minute. The other thing about Teams AI library is that it's really good for new projects. But if you've already got something you've written, and I know like lots of folks have already written bots before AI became cool, and they were doing it with Lewis and with intent matching that way. And lots of those bots exist, and they just want to make them better. They just want to add new capabilities by adding some of this newer language model stuff to kind of replace some of that Lewis capability set. So throwing it all out and starting again with the Teams AI library isn't necessarily, the best way to do it. And then there's lots and lots of other ways of doing the same thing as well. We looked at LangChain in the last session. I'm not going to cover that today. I'm going to do it a completely different way. And that's the other thing. There's just so many different ways of doing this that it's kind of changing all the time, and that makes it kind of tough to keep up. And so I'm going to show you one different way. There'll be others as well. And so don't feel like this has to be the only way. It's a way I found works quite well for me, where I've got lots of data in SQL Server and I need to expose it as a bot. All right, so this is the challenge. We've got SQL Server over on the left with our relational data, and then over on the right, we've got Azure OpenAI, and we need to kind of bridge that gap because Azure OpenAI can deal with custom data sources and data models. It can take data and use it as part of generating answers, but it needs to be in a very specific format, such as a vector data source. So what can we use to give it that vector data source? Well, there is a capability in Microsoft Azure called Azure AI Search. Now, it's actually not really necessarily meant for, when they first built it, it wasn't really meant for LLMs and AI and stuff like that. It was meant for doing searching on websites. It will work with SQL Server. It works with a bunch of other things as well, but it works with SQL Server. It creates a vector database under the hood. So it does vector searching, it does full text searching. It's very fast. You can update it over time. So it's not like you generate it once and then it's completely fixed. You can schedule a rebuild. You can do that hourly, you can do it daily, you can do it whenever you want. And it's got lots and lots of stuff in it that we're not really going to cover too much. But one of the cool things about it is you can set it up so that OpenAI can talk to it. And that's really what we're going to be looking at. How we can use this Azure AI search to, combined with Azure OpenAI, give us something that gives us access to our SQL Server data. All right, so I'm going to start right at the beginning and come over to SQL Server. So here you can see a few database tables. So I've taken the Teams Nation session catalog and I've kind of put it into a database format. So this is kind of a fairly standard, this is how your data might be. We've got a sessions table, we've got a speakers table, and they're sort of joined together because every session has got some speakers in it somewhere. I'll show you that in a minute, but here we go. There's a room ID, there's an ID here, and then I think in the speakers table, there's an ID to their session. Yeah, you can see the sessions. So it all kind of ties together. So the first thing I've had to do is create a single view that represents my data in the most verbose way possible. So what I mean by that is do all the lookups that you need. Make your table really de-relationize your data. Okay. this would be as if you were going to export it for a report or something like that. So you can see it's quite a wide table. I've done all the lookups and joins. We've got a description, we've got a title. I've pulled the track from the rooms. I've also taken the bio, the speakers, I've collapsed them together. So we've got a single speakers column, and so this is kind of, you want to put as much information into this as you can, really, because this is the thing that is going to feed your search. And so the way it works when you set up the Azure Search Service is you give it this data, and then you tell it what's important, like which bits of data it should look at, and then it will use that as its kind of source of data, and that's what it creates its vector mappings of. So you want this to be as good as possible. The other interesting thing I'm going to come back to a little bit is you'll notice with the session start information and also the session end information, I can't even find the end, oh, it's over here. I've turned them into text rather than doing them just as the date time. I've turned it into a sort of a string, almost like a sentence. That kind of helps. It seems to help anyway, the AI side of things later on. It wants to kind of, I think it's probably built to ignore some of the date stuff because it doesn't really know what to do with it. So this kind of gets around that a little bit and seems to help it deal with dates more like a string. Okay, so that's the first thing. We've created this view that represents our data and in a kind of a nice wide way. Okay, let's come over to Azure now, and I'm going to show you in this resource group, I've got a search service. So you can create this in an Azure. You just go to the marketplace, search for search service, search service. It looks like this, and you can create it. When you create it, I'll jump into it. The first thing you do is you can use this import button here to connect your data. Now, I've already done this once. I'm just going to step through the process again a little bit so you can see kind of what's involved. So the first thing you do is click import, and you can import your data from a number of different places. Like I say, we're going to use a SQL database, but you might have your data elsewhere. You might have it in different places. So you can bring it in from a variety of different places. I'm just going to use this database. You can see I've already set it up and it's already looking at that particular view. So that's sort of the first thing you do is point at your data and point at a single table or collection, which can be a view that represents your data that you're building your search on. Next thing you do is it's going to think about it, and then you can optionally add an AI service. So if you've already got an AI service, but in Azure, you can use that, or you can create a new one. You will get better results if you do that than if you completely miss this step out, because you're not really adding any kind of magic AI smarts, if you like, to the searching that happens. You can also add what are called enrichments. So enrichments are where cognitive services or AI, Azure AI, will run over your data and try and pull out useful information about it. So things like names of people, names of organizations, keywords, locations, and things like that. And they will then get sort of added to your data as additional sources of data alongside. So things like keywords can be really useful for search, because then you can pull those out in search, as can kind of people's names and things like that. And it's just a case you can just tick these and they will get added as additional fields to the end of your data set. Okay, yes, of course, I've already done this once, so it's already got a skill with the same name. Okay, now this bit is much more for if you're creating something that's going to go, let's say, on a website, because this can power like a full-on site search where you're doing filtering, you're doing sorting, you're pivoting on results, you're adding to results, and so it can support all of that if you want it to, and it comes with like a rich SDK. It comes with some samples that you can use to put to show you how to put it onto a website and stuff like that. And we're not really going to use any of that stuff today. We're really just going to focus in on on how we're going to use it for a bot. But there's two things here that are important. The first is searchable, which is when I do my search, which fields should I use in the search? So what fields should be used as sort of candidates, if you like, for the search? I'm going to untick ID and I'm going to untick join link because I don't think those are things you want to include when you're searching. But I think everything else is probably valid. And then but for what we want to do, I think everything probably should be retrievable. So that retrievable means, does it come back in the search results? So you might choose, for instance, to exclude the ID. You might exclude some other information that's important to you, and you can include the data for searching and then not for retrieval. So it forms part of the search. So they could be like hidden keywords that you kind of want to use to influence the search results, but you don't necessarily want to show people. So they can be part of the search targets, but not part of the retrieval targets. And then if you were putting this on a website, you'd choose filtering and sorting and stuff like that. So you kind of go through and create that. You need to choose a key. Okay, I'm going to choose ID as my key because I know it's unique. And keep going, give it a name. This is where you get to choose sort of the schedule it gets built on. And I didn't set up change tracking, we should probably go back, and I probably should set up that. Change tracking allows it to know when certain data has changed, because obviously over time the data in your source data is going to change, and so when you're rebuilding those indexes, it needs to understand what's different to make the change. So I won't worry about doing that now, but I'll click submit and it will create it, and then it will get listed in here. So I'm just going to use the one I built the other day because it's probably slightly easier. So there's 62 documents in here, which is 62 rows in my database. And if I was to search for Copilot, for instance, you can see how quick it is. I mean, it's quick anyway because it's quite a small data set, but I get back this data around all the different Copilot sessions. Okay. Now, by itself, that's great. And if I wanted to put this on a website, I can do, and that's cool. But this is like the first step to getting something working against a bot, is making this nice search experience here, because what we're going to do in a minute is going to add this to our OpenAI. In fact, let's do that right now. So let me come over to here to, this is the Azure OpenAI Studio Chat Playground. Okay, so hopefully you saw this in the last session, and I can ask some questions here. I mean, I can say what sessions on Copilot are there, and it's not really going to know what I mean. Okay, because this is just an LLM. This is the GPT 3.5, I think, LLM. What I can do over here, though, is add my data. Okay, so this is where it gets kind of interesting. So I can add a data source. I can choose Azure AI Search. I can choose some other things, but I can't directly choose SQL Server. Okay, but I can choose this AI search. I can choose my AI search service and my search index. Okay, and I'm going to choose use custom field mappings because it lets you see in a minute how, like, what happens next. You can leave it empty, leave it blank, and it'll try and guess, and it might do a good enough job, it might not. So use custom field mappings takes you to this place here where you get to say, okay, of the source data or the data that's in the index, this is where we were looking at the list of retrievable values in the search index. This is where this comes in handy because they're all listed here now. Okay, and I can say what of this is content data. Now, I also need to choose these values. So I actually made field names to match the title, the URL, and the file name. Which title, no, so what am I doing? Let's do ID for title. Let's do that, and then let's do URL like that. And then for the content data, I'm just going to choose everything else that I haven't already chosen, apart from possibly the ID information, that sort of a thing. Okay, this is all the content, the useful content that I want to bring back to my bot, and the track as well. That I want to bring back to my bot. So, and what's going to happen is that's going to get added as a data source. And now when I ask my question, as well as the LLM, it's going to take my question, it's going to send it off to the Azure, the search index, to do that search. And then the results that come back are going to get used in creating the answer. Okay, so now if I was to say, I mean, we haven't actually, I should check really, because we haven't also set up a prompt or anything like that, but let's just try anyway. What sessions Copilot are there? Okay, so a different set of answers, and there's a few things that are happening here. So first of all, it's using our data. So it's used our search service, it's got the data back, it's done a decent enough job of sort of referencing it and laying it out. Second really important thing to notice, it's got citations, it's referencing the data. And this is a really important point for confidence for users that I think, you know, needs to happen where you've got bots that look at data. I think it's really important that they go back to the user and tell the user where that data came from to instill confidence. And you can see here it's referenced 5 things, and these are the 5 references, and these are just the IDs actually of the sessions in the database, because I used ID as the title when we were setting up. So that's fine, and that's great. A couple of things. First of all, I'm just in the playground, so how do I get that into real code? And secondly, can we do a better job with some of these references about sort of showing more information maybe and better information? Okay, now if you've got to this point, then you might be thinking, okay, great, I know what to do now, so let's get this and put this into my bot. Yes, let's do that. So if I go to view code, I can see different code samples. If I look at the C# one, for instance, there's an SDK, and I can do all sorts. I can add it in. The thing though about this is that all of these code samples don't talk about adding in your data. They only talk about just like the stock deployment as it is. So in fact, let me show you. Even the curl one, where you're just making an API call. It does put some of the information in around data sources. Okay, so that is really useful, and that's exactly what we're going to do in a minute. We're going to use the API endpoint for OpenAI to call our data and do that. So in order to do that, we've got our chat session here. We would go and deploy it to a deployment. So if I look in here, you can see I've already got a deployment set up. That just gives us a deployment name and that we can use alongside our API. And what I should do, I'm just going to open Postman and show you in Postman rather than trying to show you through the examples, because it'll be able to give you a much better example. So here is that exact same API call that we just looked at in the code samples, and I can make that call. You can see here in the body, I can ask a message, I can ask a question, but I'm not putting any information here about data sources. So if I was to send this off, I'd get a answer down here somewhere that says, I don't really know what to tell you. So go and check the website, which is fine. Let's compare this call then with this call, same endpoint. The thing that's different is that we are providing this data sources section. Okay, don't try and write all this down. I've got links to a GitHub project at the end with all of this in it, so you can just use that. And in here, this is the search service. This is my key, which I shall change at the end of the session to the search index. These are the content fields I want to include. This is the file, the title, the URL. This is my prompt telling the bot what to do. And then this is my question. What sessions on Copilot are there? And so if I now send that, hopefully you'll see. So I get quite a lot of stuff back. If I just go down here, you can see this is actually, I get a collection of messages. The first one has a role of tool, okay, which we'll come back to. The second one has a role of assistant, which is the actual answer. So you can see there's a good answer here, several sessions, and then tells them what they are. And it's got these citations in with doc 1, doc 2, doc 3, doc 4. And they are referenced by this one here that says tool, and there's a collection of citations in here. So you've got the content, and then you've got for each citation loads of information about the citation itself. You've got the ID, the file name, the URL, and then you've got a whole bunch of other information. Basically, all the values of the content come back for you to use, so you can see all the bio here. So lots and lots of information, so you can build out kind of something useful. Okay. So that's interesting and useful. We've got API calls that we can make now to call Azure OpenAI with our data in a relatively straightforward way that was easy to set up. Let's put it into some code. So I've got a couple of different ways of doing this. I'm going to start off with this one because I think it's probably familiar to everybody. This is, let me just stop it for a minute. This is the Echo bot, the Teams Echo bot sample. Okay. If you haven't seen this, you can go to Visual Studio and create a new bot framework bot and call it the Echo bot. The reason for starting here is that this is a jumping off point for lots and lots of people who build their own bots. And so I thought it would be a good place to go. Oh, sorry, you don't want to see that. There we go. You don't want to see that either. I thought it'd be a good place to go for people to start, because if you've already got bots that you built around this to start with, you'll find adding this into them really, really straightforward. Okay, so let's just get the emulator running for this, and I'll just prove that this is doing what I said it was. Okay, let's just start this. So this is the Echo bot. So anything we send it's just going to send straight back. Not very interesting. I just want to show you how little code I need to change. Okay, so I'm going to take away this on message activity async, and I'm going to replace it with this on message activity async. What's that doing? Apart from interesting. Let's just try and see if we can fix that, because we need that. There we go. It's going to call question search.answer question. It's going to pass the text that the user sent, which is the same one up here that we echoed back. And then whatever gets returned from this is going to send as the answer. It's going to send as the text. Now this answer question function is just one that I've built myself. It's really simple. I'm going to go through it. And this is all in the GitHub project. I'm going to post at the end so you can get hold of it. All I'm doing is creating an HTTP request. Okay, so I'm building up a request model using the same stuff we just looked at in Postman. This is exactly the same. I'm just building it out in here, and then I'm putting it through a web request. You can see a post request. You can see the headers. And then when the results come back, I just take the actual answer, I deserialize it, and then I pull out the answer text being where the role was assistant. Ignore the citation stuff for now, we'll come back to it. But for now, that's all I'm doing. So if I run that, then give me the emulator again. This time, if we say, what sessions on Copilot are there? Then we'll get a nice answer back. Okay, because all we're doing is calling that API, getting results back and laying them out. So that's great. Let's do something about those citations though, because this is good by itself and you can see they're referenced, but we're not actually doing anything with them. So let's fix that. And then, so let me come down to, let's try this one, which is a little bit more involved, but not really. I'm just making that same answer question. Let's find the reference for that. That same answer question call as well as getting the answer, it also gets the citations and it deserializes them into a list of citations. That's all that's happening there. It's just pulling out where the role is tool, and then it's just turning them into an object, which is just an object I made just to hold all the different things that I know are in a citation that gets returned. And if we've got that, that means that I can then loop through them. I can make a nice title, and I can just put them out with the title and the URL. So let's give that a go and see what that looks like. Let's try Teams this time. Okay, so it's not the prettiest, but you can see that, okay, I can do this with a title. I can like the title, I can put out the link. And I can also ask other things as well. So for instance, I can say, when is my session? And it should be smart enough to figure that out. Yeah, you can see it's got pulls out the starts on time. It's a very strange way of talking about how it ends. It's on the same day and year, but then it's got the link. It's got some other links as well, which is kind of interesting. It always seems to return, like you can control how many links it returns, but it's never great at saying, well, I only really need one link. It always kind of goes overboard with all the links. So that's useful. And if we can do all of that, then it follows as well that we ought to be able to get it working in Teams. And that's absolutely true. So I've taken that exact same bot. I've just saved us all some time. I published it as a Teams bot. So you can see, and this is probably no surprise because it was a bot framework bot. So there's no reason why it won't work in Teams. It just needs publishing and that setup stuff. And you can see you can bring it into Teams that way. And make it work like that. So that's one way of doing it. The other way that I kind of want to show, because I know lots of people are doing this as well, is to use Visual Studio Code and some of the newer ways of building Teams bots. So I kind of want to show that also. So over here, so this is an Echo bot that I built using the super fantastic Teams toolkit to go and create a new JavaScript bot. And I'm just going to, out of the box, that comes looking like this. And you can see with just run through it real quick. You've got it's an Echo bot as well, right? So I've actually commented out the Echo bit and replaced it with my bit. So if I was to just put that back again, this takes it back to being a standard Echo bot. And if I hit F5, the other reason for showing you this is that there's a brand new and brilliant emulator for Teams that it uses. So as soon as that loads, I'm going to show you that. So I don't know if you've seen this or not. This is now in the latest Teams toolkit. If you get it, it's a very cool. It's the Teams app test tool. Really, really useful for testing apps that you're building for Teams, or bots particularly that you're building for Teams, because it can. The reason this is cool on top of the bot framework emulator we were just using is that I can mock things like being installed, uninstalled, adding users, channels and teams and stuff like that. So I can do all of that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's not why we're here. This is, as you can see, it's doing exactly what you think it's going to do. And then if I come in here and get rid of this echo call and instead do answer text. What is answer text? I've awaited a function called answer question, which I probably should have put in its own file, but I cheated. And it's this one up here called answer question. All I'm doing here is calling that API endpoint again. And I'm not even going to do anything with the citations on this one because I was sort of running out of time a little bit. So posting the data with all the data source and the prompt and the question, exactly the same. Here it is. And then taking the response, taking the messages, find the one that is assistant, taking the content out, and displaying it to the user. What does that look like? What sessions on Copilot are there. So you get the same answer. Yeah, so a couple of different ways to show you. This is not supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be nice and easy and straightforward to add this stuff into your existing code, your existing applications. I hope what I've shown you is that it kind of is. That's certainly the plan. Let's have a look at our slides because I can't remember what we got. Okay, so let's do some wrapping up about what we've just looked at. We started off with our data in SQL Server, and we've managed to expose it to OpenAI. And the way we've done that is by using Azure Search Service as our kind of like glue in the middle, because Azure Search Service can talk to SQL to ingest its data, and it can create vector database stuff, vector mappings, okay, which Azure OpenAI can use. That gives you an API. With an API, you can do kind of almost anything. You can add it almost to any implementation, and it's super simple to do. Okay. Now, the thing about all of this AI stuff is that it is moving really quickly. In time, Microsoft will build a lot of that stuff into their into all their SDKs. So if you're using the OpenAI SDK for C#, you'll find eventually it will support data sources in this way. So you won't need to do all of this stuff. But in the meantime, calling APIs actually makes things super easy. It's a really nice separation of concerns for your code. You can put it in lots of legacy code as well, and very quickly swap it out. And the reason I wanted to show it in the use case of all the EchoBot stuff is just to show how easy it was to kind of swap it out from one to another. And so you could swap it out from your Lewis implementations that you've got, or anything else that you've got, any keyword searching stuff that you're doing at the moment. And really importantly, it includes all that citation stuff, which I think is a must if you're building bots that look at particular sources of data and retrieve information and present it to users. I think for confidence, users need to see where that data is coming from in order to understand its relevance and its importance, and just have confidence in the whole system. Okay, let's talk a little bit about costs, because we haven't so far. It's not free. So Azure Search Service is really interesting. It's got a free tier, and then they've got a basic tier. And the basic tier is not entirely consumption based. Okay, it's fixed cost, or fixed minimum cost, and that's around 70 euros a month for their basic tier. Now, can you use the free tier? Yes, you can use the free tier for searching, but you cannot connect a free tier search service to Azure OpenAI. Annoying, isn't it? You have to connect a basic or above. It used to be standard and above, and that was like 300 euros a month, and that made it really hard to recommend as a solution. But for 70 euros a month, if you've got a real business problem you're solving, this feels like it's doable, especially because you can reuse this search service in other places. You can use it on a website, you can use it in other applications where you need to expose that data. So it doesn't feel entirely terrible. And then obviously you've got your cost for OpenAI chat, but they are all based on usage and token size. They're entirely consumption based. But just be aware that one around search service, it's not an entirely consumption based thing. It is slightly fixed cost there. Okay. Last slide. Get started today. You can do this today. Go and just the four kind of steps to remember is you can go and create an index to represent your SQL data. You can do that today. Find a good view, start creating an index on it. Go and create a OpenAI Studio Chat deployment based on your data there. Start with the playground, add your data source, create a deployment, get your API keys. If you don't already have a bot, you can go and create a new Echo bot. Loads and loads of stuff online about how to do that. But if you've already got a bot, go and find your bot. Call the API. And then finally, I'm going to put these in the chat in a minute when I stop talking. The two GitHub projects to the two versions of the code I showed you, the one for Visual Studio and the one for Visual Studio Code, exactly as I showed them to you. So you can take those bits. I took all the keys out, obviously, so you'll have to do that. But I put placeholders in where they should go.